Hi, I'm Ricky Sherwood.
And I'm Dave Adams.
And you're watching The Core Mechanics.
Today we're looking at number 21 on Mike Selinker's list of 100 games you absolutely, positively must know how to play. Settlers of Catan. Or Catan.
Catan.
Catan?
Catan.
Settlers of Catan, or as it would later be known, just simply Catan, was released in 1995 and was designed by Klaus Tuber. It was released by Cosmos and plays between 3 to 4 players in between 60 to 120 minutes. Settlers of Catan begins by setting up the board by placing down a randomized set of tiles. These tiles will produce resources each turn. Your job is to use those resources to build roads, build settlements, create cities, or to buy development cards. Each city and settlement is worth points in their own right, but you can also receive points through development cards by having the biggest army or the longest road. Your goal is to be the first to reach 10 victory points. So with over 24 million copies sold, and that was probably last year by that stage. It's probably more by now, I would suspect.
It just keeps flying off the shelves.
Over 24 million copies sold. Catan now, as it is known, is one of probably the best-selling Euro games around, I imagine.
Well, just one of the best-selling games.
Yeah, that's true. One of the best-selling board games.
Everyone I know personally has played Catan, owns Catan, keeps bringing Catan.
And I'm always surprised when I find people still today who want to introduce me to this great game they've discovered called Catan. Do you know this game, Catan? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
It's probably one of those games that you find has 1,001 positive reviews. So when people go out looking for the first game to buy, to play with the family, they jump online, they're like, good board games to play. Number one, everyone's list, Settlers of Catan.
And I don't think you can discredit the whole viral nature of the game itself.
Yeah.
It is the sort of game where people go over, and you remember these. I don't know if you ever did this as a kid. I would go over to my cousin's place to play board games, or I'd go over to a friend's place and someone during the course of the evening would say, let's play a game.
Yeah.
Great. And instead of pulling out Monopoly now, it's quite probable that they're pulling out Catan. And for the most part, it's probably been one of those games to break into people's shelves, even though they wouldn't necessarily realise that there's a whole world of gaming out there.
Yeah, and I was introduced to Monopoly at age 6, 7 by my parents.
I'm sorry. Are you okay? You're right?
I was okay about it until... we discovered there was more out there. Ignorance is bliss.
Ignorance is bliss.
But no, I was introduced by my parents. But now thinking, if I've become a parent and I want to introduce gaming to my children, maybe I'll start with Settlers of Catan.
It's not a bad one to start with, though, is it?
No, it doesn't really take a lot of skill to learn to play mechanically. The skill and strategy will start coming with human interactions.
It's highly strategic.
Of course it is. Yeah, tell me about strategy.
There's saving up resources in your hand.
Yeah.
There's...
How do you get those resources, Dave?
You strategically roll a die.
Of course you do. And we all know, of course, that the probability of getting an 8 or a 6
is much higher
than getting an 11 or a 12.
Yep, or a 3.
Yep, sure. So why is it that every time I play this game, I have nothing in my hand, nothing to trade with, and everyone else is just racing to the end?
You sure it's every time?
Every time I've played this game.
Every time?
Yeah, not one of my favourite games. Not saying it's a bad game.
What?
If you like Settlers of Catan, unless you're Dave, if you like Settlers of Catan, it's fine.
I mean, in terms of strategy, what are the things you do strategically?
Your setup in the beginning.
Your setup in the beginning is probably the most strategic part.
That you can do.
I know that there are people out there who argue that you should never trade with anyone.
And this is where I'm going to stick up my hand and say, then stop playing Catan. Because that, to me, is the meat of this game.
Is the trading?
Because you can't rely on the dice rolling. You need to get your resources somehow. Yes, you've got your docks, which you can go in and trade X amount of resources for. But getting what you need, to me, Catan is a human game. with dice rolling elements.
That's
just
a
to
nice
give you
thing to
one or
say
two
about a
things.
game you don't like.
But maybe that's also been my problem, is I'm a terrible negotiator.
I think if people are working at that level, it is taking the game a bit too seriously. For me,
Yeah?
in Catan, there are games I take seriously. There are games I play competitively. For me, it doesn't lend itself to that, because if I'm playing Catan and I'm not trading, or I'm trying to negotiate every trade, then the game's going to take way too long.
It does slow down a lot.
It will slow the game down. And I'm not in Catan for a long, lengthy, heady game. I'm in it like, let's get in, let's have some fun, let's trade stuff away. If I don't need it, you can have it, and give me something that I can use. Great. And if I can't, well, let's just move on. That's maybe something we haven't considered yet, really, is the interaction of the players at the table. That trading element now means that every person's turn matters to me.
Yeah.
So I might have the chance, if I'm looking for a certain thing, to be able to trade with that person to get it. I also think it's interesting that just because it's your turn and you roll the dice, you don't necessarily benefit.
Yeah.
So that trading becomes really important. If you are rolling, you don't get what you want, you need to trade. Like, I enjoy the game. Like, I am a Catan fan, but not as much since discovering Star Trek Catan. Such a good game.
Why? What's different? What's different?
Look, for starters, let me say the title again. Star Trek Catan.
Yes, I look forward to colonizing those blank pieces of space. Catan's also one of those games that's been around for, well, since 1995.
1995.
Yep, and we've seen, like, championships for this game come out.
Which,
thousands of players.
okay, at some point you have to say, all right.
That was probably more symbolic of the time.
As tongue-in-cheek. Well, no, but I mean, the thing is, though, that now they've got pandemic
Yes, that's right.
championships.
But the idea of Catan as a competitive tournament-based game to me?
Well, because I think you're right, though. Like, if you're going into it on a light level, great.
Yeah.
But when you have to roll for resources, that's an issue. And if you are playing it competitively, then you're probably not going to be trading resources, unless you can actually reap a great benefit from it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure that would add value to the game for me.
I do love the effect cards, like getting the biggest army and that sort of
The
stuff.
thing I like about them is they're floating victory points.
Yes.
And you can't, I think it does I think it creates enough incentive to go after them, when it means that I can almost hide what my potential victory condition could be, because if I then just suddenly invest in 3 roads at the end, and bang, I've got the highest road, turn over my development cards, and I've got everything on the board, and I've won.
Yeah.
So I think legitimately it creates an interesting balance of power, especially if someone's got the card, and you know that really the challenge is you want to get it away from them before they suddenly steal the victory away.
So why do you think Mike's put this on the list?
It's been huge as a game.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you've got a game which is tile lane, and I don't know back in 1995 how many games were legitimate tile lane games of this sort, where the setup could be different every time, where it used probability as a way of determining strategy and where you go. I like even in that beginning section where you set a settlement down and a road to get yourself started. So you literally start with 2 victory points already on the board. But you go first to last, last to first, as a way of keeping it equal.
Yep.
So that the person who went last gets now the first choice. I think that's great.
Yeah.
Things like that. Really, in my mind, back in 1995, when really Monopoly was
King of the Hill.
King of the Hill, you've got this game that comes along that is now about trading resources, and it brought Euro games to the rest of the world, and I think it relaunched the gaming industry in the way that we understand it today. It was innovative. It was genuinely innovative.
Well, speaking of innovation, what can you replace Settlers of Catan with currently?
Well, I would replace it with Settlers of Catan Star Trek Edition. I don't know. I mean, in terms of actual...
Well, this is what I mean. In terms of the gameplay experience, I can't think of anything that acts at all like Catan.
Well, a lot of people have picked up on the the hexagon feature, or the hexagon, the way it fits together, and I think that's been utilised for a lot of games.
Yeah.
Really well too.
Yeah.
It obviously works.
But success usually breeds clones.
Well, it's true.
Maybe it's just because there's 1,000,001 versions of Catan out there.
Well, and that's true. It is prolific.
Yeah.
Like, it's hugely prolific. Like, in terms of production,
Yeah.
I think it's still up there as a massive seller.
Yeah. But say deck building games, you've got Dominion, Legendary. You've got quite a few different things in there. Say worker placement, you can think of a few games there. But Catan, because yes, it's a tile laying game. You lay down tiles to set up the board to play on. And then introduce resource gathering as a random element.
Yeah, but it is like that. Resource management is important to the
Very
game.
much so. Yeah.
And it sort of really sets the tone for what a European game is. Yeah. That whole trading of sheep and cattle. It could be anything really, and it would still stay the same.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot that this game brought to the world.
Yeah.
And its popularity is probably deserved, I would say.
Yes.
Well done.
But no, Settlers of Catan, iconic.
It is iconic.
If nothing else, iconic. So
Yeah.
in terms of being a designer, what do you think you can take away from Settlers of Catan?
I think there's a few things I would like to see, I would like to play with and give a go. I like the idea of a board that changes, like that ability to set up a board differently each time. I think it's very simplistic in Settlers of Catan how it does it, and that's the beauty of it. I think it's slick in that way. It's not too cumbersome. There are games that have different setups each time, but some of them get a bit clunky or they take a bit of time, a bit of effort. I like that. I like a board that can change, and I think if I was designing a game, I'd be interested to explore more of that, using hexagons to create the map. I think the couplets are really important. The idea of how different mechanics link together. So the setup is important because it determines the resources we chase.
Yeah.
The assigning of the numbers to the resources is important because it says which resources are going to be more reliable than others.
Yeah.
I think the trading is important because it keeps people interested, and I can't be guaranteed to get resources on my turn. The army is important, and the development cards are important, and the longest road is important for setting up strategies to sneak away with a win. So all of these things they work together, and I like how beautifully they all couple together to create that gameplay experience.
For me, I think Settlers of Catan is probably the best example of a game that can be played at multiple levels.
Oh yeah.
If you're an absolute beginner,
Yep.
you can play Settlers of Catan.
Yeah.
And might even come out on top.
That's true.
If you're at an intermediate level, you can play Settlers of Catan and be introducing some more of that nuance, start doing more trading, start, actually working on strategies, that sort of thing. You can play at that level. You can play at a very high level where you've calculated all the statistics.
Yeah.
You can play with expert players, and you can mix all levels.
Yeah. But that will never be me.
No.
I'll never work at that level. That level is just, no thanks. I don't want to play the game at that level.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I still have a lot of fun with it. And even though it's not a game that you've enjoyed,
if it's at the table, always happy to sit down and play. At the very least, it's a bit of a laugh.
Yeah. And of course, now, once I introduce you to Star Trek Catan, it'll be your instant favourite.
Of course, it will. Yes.
I think it certainly deserves its place on the list, but I don't know if I would even, at this stage, there are games on the list that I think I would replace. So I could think of replacements for certain games, but I'm at this stage, even if it's not your favourite, even if it's not the best game on the list, I am not at the place where I would be willing to remove this from the list at all.
No, definitely. And my personal tastes in games, even I sit back and I can recognise how important Settlers of Catan actually is. Once again, coming back to that icon status, everyone knows it, everyone's played it. It's a game that you can bring out with anyone at any time, sit down for an hour and have a good time.
And enjoy, yeah.
Unless you're me.
Wait till we get to Star Trek, it'll be fine.
Sure.
Look, if you like what we're doing here, please hit that like button. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button. And until next time, my name's Dave Adams.
I'm Ricky Sherwood.
And you've been watching The Core Mechanic.